Hi, I'm Raquel from the blog Out of the Past, and I'm here with a book review video for this book. A Star is Born, Judy Garland and the Film That Got Away by Lorna, Luft and Jeffrey Vance. This is new from Running Press and their imprint with Turner Classic Movies. And here's the hardcover book, which has a dust jacket, which is removable, and the self-cover is pretty much identical to the dust jacket. So if you're like me and don't care to read with the dust jacket on, you can take this off and it still looks pretty. And this is a book written by Lorna Luft, who is Judy Garland's daughter, and Jeffrey Vance, and they team together. It's mostly in Lorna's voice. She refers to Judy Garland as Mama a lot throughout the book, but there's a lot of information, so it switches between kind of a daughter's account of her mother's story to like a film historian's account of the history behind the A Star is Born legacy from the very beginning to today. So just to give you a primer on the history of A Star is Born, it starts with What Price Hollywood from 1932, which is a pre-code produced by David O. Selznick and directed by George Cukor, stars Constance Bennett, Lowell Sherman, and Neil Hamilton. And instead of the traditional make where they have the actress and the actor, and the actress is up and coming and the actor's kind of on his way out, instead you have an up and coming actress and a director who's on his way out, and then a love interest thrown in. So that film didn't do so well at the box office, so David O. Selznick kind of repackaged it and turned it into A Star is Born 1937. Now, George Cukor didn't want to go back and direct a film that was so close to what he'd just done a few years ago, so William Wellman took it over, and that one stars Janet Gaynor and Frederick March, and it's very much traditional how we expect the A Star is Born story to be, and among many of us, including myself, we consider that the gold standard. It's the best one out of all of them. And then years later, you have the 1954 version, which George Cukor did direct. This was a great opportunity for him to work with Judy Garland. And so this stars Judy Garland, and it's a project that was purchased by Sid Luft, her husband at the time, and it was specifically for her. And it also stars James Mason. Then 22 years later, in 1976, you've got Frank Pearson as director for the Barbara Streisand, Chris Christopherson version. And then fast forward to today, you have another version starring Bradley Cooper, who also directed it, and Lady Gaga. So I'm just going to quickly go through the contents of the book and how it's structured. So it starts off with a preface by Lorna Luft about her mom, and then has an introduction by Jeffrey Vance about the context of the Star is Born story and how it fits into the history of Hollywood, and also how it fits into Judy Garland's life and career. The first chapter starts at the very beginning, gives you the origin story of how it went from What Price Hollywood to A Star is Born 1937. And what I like about this, which is unusual for classic film books, for me at least, is that this gives you a full description of the plot, point by point. And I usually don't like that, but in this case it helps, because I have seen all 5 films. I've seen What Price Hollywood, and I've seen all 4 A Star is Born films. I saw the newest one at the 2018 Toronto International Film Festival. So everything's been very fresh in my mind lately. But there are so many changes to the plot as you go through each one that sometimes it's easy to confuse them. So I appreciated that it went through all the plot points. And even though A Star is Born 1937, it was filmed in beautiful 3-strip Technicolor, most of the publicity images from the era are black and white, unfortunately. Not anything you can do about it. So then the first chapter, oh sorry, not the first chapter, the second chapter, the first chapter on the 1954 version goes through the nitty-gritty of how it was made, where like it even goes back to like Judy Garland's career up until that point, and then how she and her husband Sid Luft acquired the property, and how they made it with Warner Brothers, and how it got cast, how everything that went on behind the scenes, and then it goes through the release, and then how Harry Warner had it cut from 181 minutes to 154 minutes, and then how that really just made what would prove to be Judy Garland's comeback, and was received very well. He basically destroyed that chance for her. So her movie career almost pretty much ended at that point. She did go on to make some more films, but the comeback that she was hoping for did not happen. And this is like a beautiful image here of the premiere, which was attended by like 250 plus celebrities. And then it goes into The Star is Born from 1976, if you can see there. And this one with Chris Christopherson and Barbara Streisand, and how that almost, that pretty much saved it. It basically resolved how the 1954 version was left in terms of being the big blockbuster that it was supposed to be. Like the 1976 version kind of captures that. So it goes through that, and also discusses the new version as well a little bit, which I thought was interesting, but obviously since that movie is only just coming out, it doesn't really have that much information about it. And then there's this wonderful chapter here, A Star is Reborn, which is about how the Academy tried to restore the original as much as they could. They couldn't restore all of it because not all of it was available. So they restored it as much as it could be, and then it was re-premiered in the early 80s. And Lorna Luft describes that experience. And she also describes the experience of it being shown at the 2010 TCM Classic Film Festival, which was the first film festival for that channel, and how great experience that was, and how it was showing it to her kids, which I thought was really sweet. And there's lots of really great memories of her mom, and she's very candid, but problems that her mother had that were imposed upon her in her MGM days, but also just some personal issues she had, and also like some issues that her father, Sid Luft, had too. I thought that was really interesting, with lots of really great behind the scenes photos and publicity stills, and some just like family photos. A lot of it's black and white, even though the only black and white film out of all 5 is What Price Hollywood. All of the rest are color. So it is unfortunate, but it is a sign of the times that you do have, like, so you have like a color shot here, but then a black and white publicity still here. So it's not really much you can do, but there's some color in here. So now I'm going to go through and share 5 different interesting tidbits that I learned from reading this book. The first one is when David O. Selznick dissolved his partnership with John Hay Jack Whitney, their properties were up for sale. And that's how Sid Luft bought A Star is Born for Judy Garland. Now, Judy Garland had played the role of Esther Blodgett, Vicky Lester, in an early 1940s radio broadcast, and she fell in love with the story. And so Selznick had What Price Hollywood repackaged it into A Star is Born 1937, and then when that partnership he had with Whitney dissolved, that's when Sid Luft saw an opportunity to grab it, and then both he and Judy Garland sold it to Warner Brothers. So that was a really cool progression. I liked learning about that. So number 2 is all the furniture you see in the home that Judy Garland's Vicky Lester and James Mason's character Norman Maine own, and there's that like wonderful like sequence where she's like wearing the lampshade and she's jumping on the furniture. All that furniture Sid Luft bought at like a really steep discount and used in his own home to furnish his own home. So Lorna Luft said that when she was watching the movie later on, she just saw all this furniture from her childhood home, which kind of brought memories. I thought that was really cool. Number 3, so Luft and Garland wined and dined Cary Grant. because they really wanted him for Norman Maine, but it just did not work out. There were several problems. First of all, I mean, the character of Norman Maine, if you think about it, that is just not a very flattering role. That takes somebody who is okay with just depicting an actor, he himself is also an actor, in a downfall. And Cary Grant was, you know, in the mid-1950s, he was doing pretty well. So that would not have necessarily looked good for a major movie star. Also, Judy Garland had some issues. She had a suicide attempt that had happened a little before the filming started. So that was in the news. So he was aware of that. So he wasn't sure how stable this project was. And also they just couldn't afford his price tag, which I guess at the time had been like $300,000. So they went through a ton of actors. They tried to get Humphrey Bogart, they tried to get Marlon Brando, but James Mason was the only one really who wanted to do it. And if you look at James Mason's career, he's kind of an unsung hero. He took on lots of really great roles, but he also took on some bad ones, and he did great and everything, and he was not scared to take on something that made him look bad. Like, I mean, he played Humbert and Lolita, and that's like, that's not an easy character play, and it's not a likable character at all. So he had the humility to be able to play a character like this. So props to James Mason for that. So number 4 is the Born in a Trunk sequence that's famous in the movie. Actually was a sequence that was added well after production had already wrapped up. Both Judy Garland and Sid Luft had felt that there was something missing from the final movie, and they wanted to do kind of an homage to Judy Garland's early days in vaudeville, so they had added that after the fact. And George Cukor was not a fan. He thought that it wasn't necessarily, just added more time to what was already a very long movie. And then number 5 was that long movie was trimmed. As I said earlier, Harry Warner from Warner Brothers had it cut, and it was just completely botched. What was trimmed was destroyed and lost forever. And none of the original prints of it in its full 181 minutes survived. Like, they're all gone. So when they did restore it, they had to use photos, and they had to use, they had like the original soundtrack, so they had the audio, so they just had to put like stills, like you know, behind the scenes photos and publicity stills over. When you watch it, it kind of stands out and takes you out of the movie a little bit. I mean, this I mean, I knew this before, but what I thought was interesting was the fact that they not only did not keep the originals, but they got rid of all the trims. Like, they didn't save anything. They were like, we're just gonna get rid of it. And one thing I thought was interesting too, which I took note in the book, which is not a quote from Jeffrey Vance or from Lorna Luft or anyone who was involved with any of these movies. It's from an author named L.P. Hartley. He said, "The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there," which I think is like the best quote for Hollywood. And that is why A Star is Born has been remade so many times. Every time it's been made again, it wants to fix what happened in the past, or it wants to move on from the past and present what's a really good story to a contemporary audience. And you have to do that differently with each time you do it, because the industry has changed and people have changed and society has changed. So that was really interesting. And it also kind of shows the bad side of Hollywood, which is kind of their contempt for the past. A lot of us classic film fans have to deal with that. We have to remind people that no, A Star is Born wasn't just remade once. The new 2018 version is not, I mean, it's a remake of the 1976 version in terms of story, but it's not just those two movies, or it's not just the 1954 version and 76 version and this year's version. There's also the really great 1937 version and then the pre-code version too, and it feels like the more we remake this, the more we forget the earlier versions. And we can't forget the 37 version because it's the best one. But although some people will tell you the 54 version is the best one. So if you're a fan of any of the A Star is Born movies, and if you're interested in the history of Hollywood, and you're interested in Judy Garland, I would highly recommend this. If you absolutely hate the 1954 version, you might want to skip this book because it focuses like maybe 90% of the book is about that movie. A special thank you to Running Press and Turner Classic Movies for sending me a copy of A Star is Born. They actually sent me 2 copies of A Star is Born, so I'll make sure this one gets a good home. I hope you liked my book review. I'll see you later. Bye!